Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. In this video, I'd like to discuss seriously the issue of who's actually running the government right now. Jeremy Hunt is certainly the one presenting the public face. It's clearly not Liz Truss, but it is not at all either clear or even credible that Hunt is running the show either. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So I wasn't planning on doing this one, and hopefully it will be the last of the speculative ones before we know something more tangible. But I just couldn't help myself. The intrigue is also interesting. So let's go through the various power structures within government to consider the influence of each of them right now. So Liz Truss is still officially the Prime Minister, but it is in name only. And this is not a tired tag being bandied about only by the pointless media commentators who get their predictions disastrously wrong on a regular basis. We know what Liz Truss stands for. It's not just that she set out her stall over a 2-month period during the Tory leadership contest. That could have been her sales pitch. It doesn't mean to say that's actually what she wanted to do. But she co-authored a book, Britannia Unchained, a decade ago, which famously espoused all of the economic nonsense that she brought up in her leadership campaign and then into her government during those calamitous first few weeks. So Liz Truss isn't complex. And she wasn't trying to bolt together different policies in order to have wide appeal. She actually just went right ahead with what she wanted to do as head of government. And now all of those policies are dust. She said we must have tax cuts for the rich in order to trickle down to the rest of us. They're gone. She said that windfall taxes are a complete no-no because it stifles investment, even though corporate bosses have contradicted that line. Hunt has now said he's not opposed to them in principle. She also said that corporation tax should not go up for the same reasons. They are going up. Everything that Truss said was necessary for growth is now not happening. Her growth plan, whatever it was, has not merely been cut back, it has been disintegrated. Nothing of Liz Truss's policies are left in the government's agenda now. That means that the government's agenda is not her agenda. She's not in control, or even partially in control. She's a figurehead now, nothing more. So then we come to Jeremy Hunt. He's clearly taken the lead in public, so he's calling the shots now. No, not buying it. I am happy to believe that the complete about-face in economic policies are what he believes in. I completely believe that what he was announcing in the House of Commons yesterday is what he believes in, but that doesn't mean he's in charge. Consider this. Although Jeremy Hunt came second to Boris Johnson in the 2019 leadership contest, it was a very, very different group of MPs then. Many of those who would have been politically close to him then were either kicked out of the parliamentary party or stood down themselves at the election. They were replaced by a new breed of Johnsonites. When this year's leadership contest took place, Hunt tried to enter the race again. He didn't even get onto the starting blocks. You needed 20 MPs to back you to get into round one of the contest. He didn't even get that. So the idea that Hunt has tapped Truss on the shoulder last week and said, make way for the grown-ups, I'm going to be your Chancellor, sort it out, will you? And then I'll clean up your mess while you just take a breather. That's a complete nonsense. He doesn't have the authority. Even if Truss accepted that Kwarteng had to be a sacrificial goat and her economic policies needed kicking into the long grass, it does not make sense that she would appoint Hunt unless a very influential delegation of senior Tories representing a lot of MPs told her to. So it's much more likely that Hunt is simply part of such a delegation of what you might call Tory grown-ups who had decided to take control. But as the results of the leadership contest indicate, he can't actually be the leader of that delegation. He's just their credible chancellor, the one who would be able to do what they need them to do. Because it might even be led by Rishi Sunak, who knows? And he obviously couldn't say, make me your chancellor. You know, it may well be that there is no overall leader right now. It might be a group which includes Sunak, Hunt, maybe even Mordaunt. You know, but it was an interesting choice to send her to replace Truss for the urgent question. You know, there's any number of people who could have done it instead if it wasn't going to be Truss. You know, why not the Deputy Prime Minister? There was a report that Mordaunt sent an emissary to talk to Team Sunak about a joint ticket to replace Truss. Apparently Sunak declined. Now, if this is true, we don't know if it is or it isn't, but I would speculate that she proposed becoming Prime Minister with Sunak as Chancellor once again, and that's what he knocked back, because he's hardly likely to have knocked back the chance to actually become Prime Minister. That might indicate that Mordaunt is not part of the delegation that forced Hunt onto Truss, but that she's circling the power vacuum independently of them. So what we have here, basically, is potentially a group of influential Tories in a sort of shadowy cabal pulling the strings, with Hunt as their emissary to the cabinet, maybe. You know, they could certainly exert some control that way, but they can't actually run the government. You can't run the government like that. Granted, you can influence an awful lot of policy. If you control the purse strings, as the Chancellor does, you control quite a lot of the direction of policy. But you can't actually shape all government policy. The focus is on the economy right now. But what about other big issues for the Tory party? What about support for Ukraine? Immigration they like to kick up now and then. Dealing with the winter NHS crisis. Dealing with the news that despite what Truss said over summer, we are going to expect 3-hour blackouts on cold days in January and February. The Prime Minister is the head of government, but policies are still largely in the control of the Cabinet. And when you've got no Prime Minister, well, those Cabinet Ministers all of a sudden have a bit more control, don't they? And Truss's Cabinet was not one designed to represent the party, but to be jammed full of people who would largely agree with her. So now we have a situation where almost all of the Cabinet is at odds with this new government agenda. Now, maybe we will see further pressure brought to bear on Truss and she will reshuffle her Cabinet. That'll be interesting. If it seems that those most likely to be opposed to the new direction are eased out and those more in tune with it brought into key positions in Cabinet, we will certainly see credence for this idea of a delegation trying to pull the strings if we see a reshuffle. But for now, the Cabinet remains ideologically at odds with the new economic direction. So the Prime Minister is not running the show. Jeremy Hunt clearly lacks the authority these days in Parliament to be the boss. He's an acceptable front, perhaps, but not the boss. And in any case, can't directly control the Cabinet. We also have signs that Mordaunt is trying to exert a measure of control herself from within the Cabinet. Though she is not necessarily opposed to Hunt's moves, that is unclear at the moment. So what we have is basically a power struggle going on. It's not been exposed to the public too overtly because right now, as I said, the focus is on the economy and there's a new Chancellor who has taken the reins when it comes to economic policy. He's basically ripped up the old economic agenda as well as the one before and pursued a third direction. But there will be government business coming up which Hunt cannot influence. The Northern Ireland Protocol talks, the NHS winter crisis. Will there need to be new COVID measures soon? That's not really got much to do with him. The blackouts. How do the government manage that so that we don't find out if it's actually possible for them to end up with 0 MPs at the next election? You know, the widespread industrial action, which is about to become a lot more coordinated, it seems. All of these will need a functioning government to at least deal with politically, even if they don't properly manage them, or else the Tories will continue to look like they're still a clown show. But there is a vacuum right now. Even if Truss continues to behave herself and sort of do as she's told, it's not a sustainable position unless the Cabinet is fundamentally reformed. Then, in theory, she could hang about still as a puppet Prime Minister, but at the moment, that Cabinet is far too at odds with what I'm speculating is a cabal or delegation, whatever word you would like to use, that was the one that ensured that Hunt became Chancellor. You know, there'll be too many big players working against each other here. Mordaunt and Sunak may or may not be prepared to work with each other, but it sounds to me like each one probably isn't willing to accept the subordinate position in the partnership just yet. Ben Wallace, very popular in the party. He's threatened to resign if the defence budget is cut. Hunt wants departmental cuts. And if he leaves defence alone, and he'll probably have to leave healthcare alone as well, he'll struggle to avoid a backlash from other cabinet ministers because it means they'll have to cut more. The likely fact of the matter is that nobody is running the government now. It's not a big deal for the short term because the reality is that civil servants run things anyway. Ministers just direct them with policy decisions, but you don't need a new policy every day. So the unstable power vacuum can be maintained for a little while. It's also possible that Tory donors are exerting a bit of influence here as well. But it is quite likely that various leaders within the parliamentary party, maybe outside it, who can exert some influence, are negotiating with each other to agree a proper transfer of power. But will all the various factions agree that they need to compromise in order to get their precious stability? Johnson's supporters are hardly like to go along with it because there's no place for their chosen buffoon in these plans. So it remains to be seen just how many of them there are that will cause trouble. But they will claim that they've got the party members on their side by waving around various polls. Those who wanted Truss's economic agenda may not sit back and let the relative moderates take back control either. So although it looks like the Tories at the moment are calming down a little and they've sort of supplanted Truss, you know, after the turmoil of her promotion way beyond her abilities, this may well just be a calm before another storm. The Tory party doesn't seem particularly united, nor does it seem to even want to give the impression of unity. It's like the bad old days of Labour that keep cropping up. Various factions calling for unity because they understand it's important, but all demanding that the way this is to be achieved is for everyone else to move to their position, not everyone move to a common position between them. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.